Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm Josh Williams, and this week, for the first time ever, I am joined by a special guest. Over the course of the past few years recording this podcast, I've had a number of co-hosts, from Dave to Mo to Guy Clark to Christian Walsh. But I suppose this is the first one-off guest that I've had. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Dan Kennett. How do you feel ahead of your Analysing Anfield debut?
I feel all right. I feel I'm just coming out of a really horrible cough and winter cold and stuff like that. I'm just coming out of it, but I feel good otherwise. Josh, I'm looking forward to it. I got a high bar to live up to with Mo though. He's been brilliant.
Yeah, it's been very good. Yeah, it's been good to have Mo on board. As I said, we're used to mixing it up on this show, to be honest. Lots of different hosts and lots of different appearances getting made. But for those who aren't aware, the best way I can describe Dan is if I was
keep it nice.
Let's say I'm Julian Ward, right? Dan is probably Michael Edwards. That's probably the best way I can put that.
More like Damien Comolli.
If we're giving our listeners a bit of a history lesson, I think when I first arrived on the scene, the Liverpool scene, if you like, a couple of years back, Twitter and things, my bag was kind of tactics more than anything. Over time, I picked up on the data, the analytics to inform my opinions and things like that. But I think by the time I started to pick up on all that, you'd been doing it for quite a few years, hadn't you?
Yeah. It's been I've written some articles for the Echo. I don't think I've done a podcast. This is the first podcast with the Echo, but I've done some articles online before. Written for Tompkins Times quite a bit in the early days. Paul Tompkins, he's a big data fella, friendly data guy, and then moved on to Anfield Index when Gags Tandon, who's the founder of AI, started basically collecting their own data. Believe it or not, watching matches back on video and collecting pressing data. They developed an app to collect it as you go. You watch the guys watch the match on a screen, watch in slow motion, and then they record the actions, coordinates, the type of press it was, and the result of it, and all that. And I was brought on doing that, and especially on the data visualization side. So we might have seen a lot of the stuff I've been pushing out the last few years on the particularly from the AI Under Pressure Twitter feed.
Yeah, well, I used to write for Analysing Anfield. Anfield Index myself.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of maybe where we crossed paths a little bit.
Yeah, it's good.
As you say, there,
writers, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. As you say, you've got a podcast there called Under Pressure that you do with Gags and things like that. And anyone who likes this show, I would recommend that. Similar kind of bag.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, we're free now as well. We've come out from behind our paywall now, so we're free. So yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a shame a few years back, but I was one of the lucky ones who got access because I used to write for the site. So.
Yeah, I'm very proud of the fact that we've got more listeners. We've got a bigger audience than Piers Morgan does on Talk TV.
That's a decent little shout. That should be in your bio, mate.
More listeners than Piers.
Yeah. Morgan. Anyway, getting back to yeah. Well, getting back to the Liverpool theme. Anyway, what we're going to do this week is it's another case of Liverpool picking up one bad result and one good result, which seems to be a recurring theme on this show lately. So rather than kind of deconstructing that again, with this being a special guest kind of episode, we're going to kind of look at the landscape as a whole, bird's eye view, step back, look at the full picture. So in a nutshell, Dan, basics. What's up with Liverpool? What's your basic answer to that one?
We are conceding too many chances as a team, particularly high quality chances within 15 metres of the goal and often in central areas. It's as simple as that. The only reason we are not doing worse than we are already this season is that our goalkeeper is currently the highest performing goalkeeper in all of Europe. and it's his best ever season for Liverpool on the numbers as well. We might not have conceded. We've conceded more goals than we would like at this point, but we could have conceded a whole lot more again. So my concerns are nearly all on the defensive side, Josh.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if you do use the analytics, if you look at the numbers, they do kind of capture Liverpool as a decent attacking side. There's not too many issues on the attacking side of the game. Liverpool look kind of okay, especially considering we've lost Sadio Mane. We're integrating a new kind of profile of a striker. But on the defensive side, as you say, it's pretty horrendous.
You've got to be honest about these things. It is really bad.
Yeah. I think we can get into it, like kind of why. I think there's a number of reasons why, in my opinion. I think you can touch on injuries as one of the reasons.
Yep.
Although a few years back, when we did have what was a crisis, in my opinion, I think at the time then when Liverpool struggled a bit, it was very much it's because of injuries. Whereas now it feels like injuries are a contributing factor, but it feels like there's more to it this time. It feels like it's not a case of once everyone's back, Liverpool are going to be fine. It feels like there's a bit more to it.
And if you remember a couple of years ago, the big problem was when we went on the horrific run between Boxing Day and start of March. It was the attack that was the problem, Josh, wasn't it? It was because we could not score, or we couldn't create anything. And like now, it's very much the defensive performance then was mediocre, but it wasn't as bad as it has been so far this season.
Yeah. Well, on top of the injuries, I think you can touch on the fact that there's been quite an obvious physical decline in terms of the eye test, at least, and in terms of numbers as well, I suppose. The numbers are a little bit delicate in that case with the physical elements of the game, but obviously we were outran by 11k against Leeds, which is unheard of, really, isn't it? And,
the only thing we have to say is that Leeds always top, since they got promoted, they always top these charts. Leeds they are the most 10-10 team in the Premier League, but to get outrun by that much was a real shock.
Yeah. I think on top of that, just watching the players, like I think there's been some form of mistake made personally in terms of potentially pre-season. Like I think Man City, for example, played something like 2 friendlies in pre-season. Liverpool played about 5, and even after the first Premier League game, we were due to face Aston Villa 24 hours later. And the reason we didn't is because I think both of us suffered bad results in the first game of the season, so we ended up cancelling that.
And it's not even just the games that were played; it was the training as well, because there was reports that the training sessions were extremely hard as well, and and then you obviously just come off a 63 game season. Is it 63?
61.
And then I mean, there's got to be questions, potential questions about burnout of players, have players who've come off, and there was obviously the season started earlier because of the World Cup. We had to start about 3 weeks earlier than a normal Premier League season. So that gives you less time there, so less time off for the players, and then the decision was made to pretty much go hard on the players in pre-season. So all we can judge is the end results, can't we? Isn't it, Josh? And but right from that first game against Fulham, we were outrun all over the pitch visibly, and it was the speed of the players, the movement, the sprints as well, the high intensity runs. It was really visible right from that very first match against Fulham, and I thought the Fulham match and the Leeds match were pretty similar. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think one of the most dramatic periods for me on the eyes was the second half against Arsenal. We just looked absolutely shattered, and you could tell the difference between the two sides in terms of the respective ages of the key players and things like that. We were just outrun, I thought. I'm not exactly sure what the numbers are on that game, but just visibly it looked really bad. But anyway, in addition to the physical elements of the game, I also think there's a very obvious lack of investment, maybe you can call it, in the midfield department. That's another contributing factor to why Liverpool are having the season that they are. In my opinion, Liverpool had delayed a new midfielder for as long as they possibly could, and I am generally in favour of that approach, really, in terms of waiting for the right man. but this was a step too far, really, in my opinion. I did try and say that over the summer, and it seems to have been the case since. I mean, the players who've picked up injuries are the players who that's expected to pick up injuries.
Yeah.
The players who are declining in all elements of the game because of their age, maybe, are the players you would have expected. And the players who have performed to the level that you want, again, it's very expected. So it's been quite strange to see that Liverpool haven't really projected that this was going to happen.
Yeah, I think so. I think the fact that the manager himself said 4 days before the season started, yes, we need to sign a midfielder. I think that was a damning indictment of how we got to that point, because we didn't need one. And then 4 days before, we needed one. And then we ended up getting a loan signing. But, these things aren't without a cost. I mean, there was a loan fee, and we got to pay Artur's wages, and he's now injured until pretty much February, I think, So, and it turns out maybe his physical condition maybe wasn't as good as his agent had said, and he needed to do a lot of catch-up work, and that's what got him. That's what got him injured. So yeah, it was a big. However, we got there. I don't know whether it's the manager not wanting to sign targets. Maybe the targets from the recruitment team weren't good enough. Maybe it was the budget. Who knows? Whichever one of those three things it was, or maybe all three. And by the time we got to that point, the end result was we didn't have enough time to do any business, and we ended up making a bad signing anyway, a bad loan deal anyway.
Which is very uncharacteristic of Liverpool over the past few years. To be honest,
a panic signing, Josh. Let's be honest, it was a panic signing, Artur.
Yeah, it was, and it was again very predictable that he was going to pick up a knock. I remember saying in the podcast that we did covering what he's like as a player.
Yeah,
he was kind of like a worse version of Thiago and just as injury prone.
Yeah,
and it's. I mean,
I take it you looked at his injury history on Transfermarkt. It's just unbelievable. It's like you have to scroll down.
Yeah. I actually remember contacting a lad from Barcelona who I know on Twitter, and he specifically said as well that I think he said something like after the 60th minute, do not expect any form of pressing out of this lad because he just can't do it. Essentially, he's like a Coutinho reincarnated almost in central midfield. He hasn't got the physicality to do it.
Yeah, and I think some of these things, even the fact there was a panic signing and we didn't leave ourselves time. Some of these things might have been picked up if we'd had the time to do a full medical, but we had to do a shortened medical because of the time period. And we didn't spot these things, which maybe we could have on the sports science side, on the medical side.
Yeah. Well, on top of those elements that were touched on so far, as in impacting Liverpool's season, I think you can also add in the fact that we have a new striker to that, and the fact that Klopp has tried to toy with different systems.
Yeah.
So it's been a big, massive cocktail of loads of different influencing factors. But I suppose maybe the biggest. What would you say the biggest is out of interest on?
The biggest what? Sorry.
The biggest influencing factor out of all out of all the stuff I've touched on there.
Yeah.
What would you say the biggest influencing factor is? Injuries or midfield or what?
I think the biggest thing is the obvious physical decline of some of the key players, and I think the two biggest ones for me are Fabinho and Trent, and one of the things we can say is that the team is quite old, but Trent isn't old. Trent's 24, isn't he? So Fabinho's 28 now, or just literally just turned 29. And they're the ones who look like they've most suffered in terms of the physical side. Now, you can say that VVT looks more human than he's ever done before. Maybe he's not a complete demigod of a defender anymore. He's just a very good centre-back instead, which obviously is a big change for us. The only player who's really performing to his world-class levels is Alisson. So I honestly think that the biggest thing is the physical decline of some of the players in the key positions. And I don't know about you, Josh, but I was never really convinced by the kind of funky tactical variations that we were trying at the start of the season. With Trent going interior and high into almost like an 8 and 10 position all the time, and Elliott going really wide, and it just seemed to be tinkering, like which wasn't benefiting us really that much.
Yeah, well, the way I've described that, I've kind of used the term galaxy brain to determine that one.
I know you love that phrase. I think it's great, that galaxy brain.
Yeah. It does feel like that, though. It feels like over time, Liverpool have been desperately chasing this concept of evolution. To constantly almost remain ahead of the curve. And I think in some cases it's benefited us. I think the offside trap in line with the VAR introduction, I think, has helped Liverpool, and the introduction of a player like Thiago, I think, has helped Liverpool and things like that. But the whole Trent thing, I think, has definitely stung us, and I think it's too complex, too elaborate, and it's almost a bit daft when you think about it, and you look at how Liverpool are conceding chances. Liverpool
just look at last night.
Penetrated.
Just look how deep he was last night. Have you ever seen Trent play that? You know, how long is it since Trent has played consistently that deep, and his passes have been from mostly inside his own half? Yeah, it was a real conscious decision for him not to, and I think that's a good thing because he can do it from there. He's a playmaker, isn't he? He's got the range of passing to do that.
Yeah, well, I don't think the 4-3-3 was necessarily the issue. I think it was more a case of like the way in which the 4-3-3 had gradually developed. I think they just needed to be a bit of a back to basics thing, where we kept the 4-3-3 probably. But
with Elliot was
removed.
He was more of Elliot became more of a wide player than an 8 and a narrow 8, didn't he, as well? And it just left too much work for the midfield, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Yeah. But in terms of the physical stuff, then, just overall looking at it, in terms of being outran and the age profiles of the team and things like that, I just think Liverpool have almost sleepwalked towards becoming so far from the original identity that we're now kind of lacking that and looking a little bit like Rodgers in this final year, if I'm honest. Like I think Liverpool's pressing numbers, I spoke to you the other day, didn't I? Liverpool's pressing numbers in the final third are down.
Yeah.
In the middle third, I think we're down, and then the defensive third we're up. And I tweeted the other day, I'm not sure if you've seen it, Liverpool's still in the Premier League this season, yet to score a single goal from high turnover. I think that's
wow. Yeah.
That's an incredible statistic, that for me, considering the only other two sides in the division with no goals from high turnovers are the bottom two, Wolves and Nottingham Forest, which just, it's a team coached by Jurgen Klopp. It defies logic, really.
Well, if you think about it, we've changed systems multiple times in the last 6 weeks, and all of them have, before going back to the tried and trusted last night, but all those changes have been based around making us more compact and essentially deeper in the pitch, Josh. And we haven't even tried to sort of seek out the high pressing anymore. We've almost we've seen this in the stuff that we do under pressure with our own pressing data. The locations in which we press have completely changed. We don't chase down opposition. We don't actively hunt the ball anymore in the final third. And that's what we very much did. We stopped doing in the 4-4-2. And I think there's two reasons for that. I think one is the physical side, and secondly is the we don't want to leave ourselves exposed on the counter attack and in negative transition. And I think one of the big things on the stats wise is the number of times all our players get dribbled past. I mean, if you look at a league ranking of all the players in the Premier League, we've got so many in the top 50 players for number dribble past, and that's not a good thing because James Milner, perhaps unsurprisingly, because he's 37. He's got 2.4 dribbled past per 90 minutes. And now that's the most of any player in the Premier League with over 300 minutes played. But then you've got Fabinho, 1.4 times per 90, Elliot, 1.4, Joel Matip, 1, and Trent, 1. And if you add those up between them, that's 7.5 dribbled past, and mostly defensive players. You can't be giving yourselves up 7-8 times a day getting dribbled past inside your own half, can you, Josh?
Yeah, no, it is a shambles, and I think if you touch on Fabinho as well, obviously the physical stuff that you mentioned about Fabinho, I think it's interesting when you actually think about the theory that we might have got it wrong in pre-season 9, when in reality we had a break, a longer season last year. it's going to be a long season this year with a game every 3 days and stuff.
Yeah.
I think if there has been a massive physical decline across the board, I actually don't think it's that much of a surprise if Fabinho looks the worst, because I think physically, in terms of his running ability at least, Fabinho is the slowest. He's never been that. So if you're taking a percentage off of what Van Dijk can do physically, he'll maybe just look normal. Whereas if you take a percentage off what Fabinho can do physically, he will look horrendous. He will look like he's stuck in mud. So part of me almost feels sorry for Fabinho, because we know how good he is.
And especially if you change the role of the right-sided 8 who plays there, who's meant to support him and then make sure the team stays compact. If that player is then pushed higher and wider, there's way more space there. And it's not just Fabinho, then it's the Fabinho and Trent. And then Joe Gomez, he's had some good games, but he's also had some very poor games in that right centre-back channel as well. So it's all that right half space in our defensive side, isn't it, Josh? I think is the biggest area of concern.
Yeah, well, I said a couple of weeks ago that if you look at Liverpool's system, how it works, how Trent operates, how Salah operates, and things like that, I think in an ideal world, the profile that you want on the right side of Liverpool's midfield is probably going to be like a Kante or someone like that, someone who's just going to hoover up the balls and kind of provide that defensive stability that those creative risk takers on the side of the field need. But Liverpool have instead been using another creative talent and a teenager at that in Harvey Elliott.
Yeah.
Or an aging version of Jordan Henderson, who, despite the fact he's always been kind of a runner, maybe he doesn't suit that profile as much anymore.
He's not as good as he was. He's not as good of a runner as he was, and I think he himself would admit that as well. It was his biggest strength, his athleticism, and it's even he's diminished now as well. So absolutely, that right side piece on the 8, on the right side of midfield is a big area of concern. And I don't know how did you think it went last night? Because I thought we were a lot better defensively last night. I think Konate was a big improvement in that area on that right centre back. Yeah. Well, how did you think? Because Milner played the role last night.
Yeah, well, this is why it's such a mystery, really, because last night Liverpool did look compact. We did look unified when we were pressing. There was no real. It wasn't easy to play through us. There was no real
like a bit
gaps.
of a throwback, didn't it?
And that's why it did, yeah. But that's why part of me is a bit reluctant to really assess what's going on and provide a definitive answer, because how much of it is just mental? Because our 2 best defensive performances have been against the 2 best sides we've faced in City and Napoli. I suppose you could throw Arsenal in there as well, but we weren't particularly great in that. But against those 2 sides, we kept clean sheets against both. Didn't really afford much at all in terms of big chances and things like that.
No.
So how much of that just comes back to Liverpool players being switched on, knowing that if they aren't, they're going to get torn to shreds, compared to if we face Nottingham Forest, we're not really presented with that same threat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Napoli game was encouraging for me because Napoli have pretty much been the best attacking team in all of Europe, this season.
Yeah.
I mean, they've just been unreal. And the City game, we very much played counter-attack. And we were almost surrendering, especially the second half. We barely had the ball, did we, Josh? But in Napoli game was not like that at all. It was very... I thought it was quite a traditional game from us, especially in the Champions League. We went and we were, and I think when we collect the pressing from this one, we'll see a far more traditional Liverpool pressing performance. We were, a lot of it was in the opposition half, and we were seeking out Napoli more. But we just had a bit more solidity where Trent was deeper. Konate, I think, really did help, and Milner, I think maybe he played the right 8 role slightly deeper than most of the right 8s have done this season.
Yeah, I think it may be just a case of prioritising the compactness, whereas in previous games this season, it has almost looked like we want to do the nice things in terms of playing with the ball, creating, roaming, all that stuff. But in terms of the nasty stuff, we've almost felt perhaps like we're above that now or something. Whereas that's not the case for any team, really, when you look at it.
Yeah, you've got to earn it, haven't you?
Yeah, but aside from the physical elements, then, I think the midfield we need to touch on in terms of transfers and things like that, how Liverpool work in the transfer market, because I know you have specific and interesting thoughts on how
Do
there's
I?
kind of been I think you think there's been a shift as beneath the
Oh yeah.
surface. Is there like a theory behind Edwards and all this
Uh,
stuff?
well, that's just like every can have a conspiracy theory, you know. I just think that we'll never know until Edwards writes his book why he left.
Yeah,
Ostensibly it
yeah,
was because he'd been at the club 10 years or whatever, and he wanted a break and stuff like that. And he's been out of work now, hasn't he, for well over a year, maybe 18 months now. So anyway, so he hasn't come back to anybody anytime soon. But I do think generally that we have become less of an pure analytics focus that we had, say, between 2016 and 2019, and we've definitely become a lot more vibes based, is the way I would put it. And I think it's for the worse. I have no evidence for this at all. It's just my considered opinion. I am seeing less and less pure analytical decisions. Now, some people might say that's evolution. We need to, once you need, some people are always telling me when I say this on Twitter, well, getting to the top needs a different strategy to staying at the top. Once you're there, it's a different strategy. And I was like, okay, well, if you can tell me what that strategy is, why it needs to be different, then fair enough. But, I think, yeah, I mean, whatever happened last year, summer, I think we can all agree that the process failed. Our recruitment process failed because we ended up panic signing at all. But we need, hopefully everybody who's involved in that process has already been honest about things and said, this is why I did this wrong. I did this wrong and I did this wrong, and everybody's owns up about it. And then we all agree what we're going to do going forward, and we're going to fix it starting, in January, because there's absolutely no question that we need to sign players. We need. I think we need 2, maybe 3 players. Within the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think certainly in midfield, I think it's definitely an issue. But on the whole concept that you've touched on there, I can definitely see what you mean, and I think specifically the kind of weird shift towards Portugal is a bit odd.
Yeah.
And it's coincided with Julian Ward, who used to
that's
work.
That's his area of expertise. He's got a lot of. Let's be fair, he's got a lot of contacts there.
Yeah,
I think he was at Benfica for a while, or was it one of the big clubs? He was actually there and he worked there for a while, and so did Pep as well, Linders. So I think this is natural there, but I mean,
yeah.
Portugal
well, Julian Ward.
Go on.
Julian Ward also worked for the Portuguese FA as well, and
That's right.
he can speak Portuguese and things like that. So yeah, I think and Linders obviously has a background at Porto. So
yeah,
but then at the same time, when you do look at it, I think the players that Liverpool have bought from that region have been elite quality players, and also in a numbers perspective as well. Like if you look at the just general expected goals last season, which is very basic, but Nunez was right up there with the likes of Mbappe and Lewandowski in terms of getting good quality chances in dangerous areas and things. So I think although I see where you're coming from, it's still most signings that Liverpool make, you can still attribute an analytics background behind the signing, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. No, but I think maybe the process of the recruitment process as well is not running optimally, and then I think it did fail. So I think the analytics is a key part of the process, but the recruitment process is not as seamless as it once was, I think is the best way I would put it. So yeah, but I agree with you on that. If you look at the attributes of Diaz and Nunez, the one thing they've both got in abundance is just pace. They're so fast, the pair of them, and I don't think that's a coincidence that that is it. They're both raw. They both don't necessarily speak the language well enough yet to integrate with the rest of the team. But in terms of the tools available on those two players. They're just phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think they were the top 2 last season as well in the Portuguese top flight for goals. So they both offer scoring threat, obviously in the final third and things.
Yeah, and he's big.
But I think Liverpool's midfield department. Yeah, well, Liverpool's midfield department in particular just seems to be really in need of investments, and I think it's interesting is that across the board there's kind of different people who are blamed. I suppose maybe you could put it as to why this is the case.
Yeah,
lots of people using this as a FSG out target.
Yeah,
some people blaming Julian Ward, and some people blaming Klopp as well. I think it's probably a mixture of all, to be honest. But this one does feel a bit more Klopp for me. He did seem set on the idea that earlier in the summer we didn't really need any more midfielders if we couldn't get the top man. And on top of that as well, I think the decision to stay loyal to players who've served them, I think is a classic manager who's been in charge for a long time issue that we've seen in the past with other coaches as well. And I think Klopp's kind of fallen for that with the likes of Milner and Henderson maybe, and Ox and players like that.
Yeah, I think it is that's what I'm saying. The vibes based side of things. There's loyalty. We'll never know. But we can assume that Jurgen is very loyal to his lieutenants. So, but what you said though is absolutely right. It's very difficult to pin down it's whoever you previously wanted to blame for everything going wrong. You can still blame them. It's like and nobody knows either way. So, but like I think the one target there was a lot of noise about, other than Jude Bellingham, was Matheus Nunez, who went to Wolves. And is it any coincidence that he is also Portuguese, Josh?
Yeah, I know. It is interesting, isn't it? But I don't know. The reason I would kind of doubt as to whether Liverpool have moved away from any sort of analytics type thing.
Yeah,
is the club is still owned by FSG.
Yeah,
so that's my major worry if FSG was to ever sell up would be that Liverpool would move away from analytics type thing, and maybe if they had sold Liverpool and Liverpool were doing this business, I'd be a bit more suspicious that we've been the Moneyball ways here. But the fact that John Henry is still in charge of the club and stuff, I can't see Liverpool consciously moving away from it. But maybe it's been a case of over time, certain people in their committee have got more power, the likes of Linders maybe. Obviously Edwards is no longer there to challenge Klopp, which we know he was good at doing.
One intangible could just be in lockdown as well. I mean, everybody went into lockdown, including football, and you don't know how dynamics and relationships change over lockdown, and then all of a sudden you've got to come back and things are different, and maybe that was a tipping point. We don't know. So but I think I'm not right. I say I'm definitely not writing this off at all, Josh. I'm just saying that I think we've got a little bit rusty. The process has got a little bit suboptimal, and I think as long as everybody can get around the table who's involved in the process, speak honestly, and I think we'll be fine going forward again, and then everybody will realise what they need to do a little bit different in their part of the chain.
Is it complacency, do you think, or
could well be? But I mean, we know right from Klopp's very first press conference that he's got final say on all transfers. And that could be a rubber stamp, but he might be saying, no, I don't want that player. I only want this player, and that is that he has the final say. He is the manager. But like you said, I mean, I heard the podcast she did with Dave, I think it was, about Tchouaméni and Bellingham, right? And those two players have very little in common, apart from the fact that they're both talents. In terms of the way they play and their styles on the pitch, Josh, they're not that similar, are they?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah, one's quite offensive minded, really, and the other, I suppose, is a bit more tilted towards the defensive side of the game. Really.
Yeah, but they're not they wouldn't if you were searching for similar profile players, you wouldn't see Tchouaméni and Bellingham very close together, would you?
No, probably not.
And then Nunez is different again, and Matheus Nunez is different again.
Yeah. I mean, what are your thoughts on Liverpool's decision to kind of? I mean, the whole Klopp thing earlier in the summer, he did seem set on not signing a midfielder, and then towards the end of the summer, he said something which I thought was quite interesting. That he said something along the lines of, compared to the people who I'm working with or the owners or whatever, he said I'd be a bit more inclined to take a risk, in reference to signing a player. What are your thoughts on his comments there like that? Because it kind of reminded me a little bit of a talk given by Ian Graham at the Statsman conference that I attended a few years back, where he kind of talked about how I think he said something like going from 30th percentile player to 17th percentile player. You gain about 2 points per season or something like that. And I think when considering Liverpool have just got to 3 cup finals and delivered, what was it, 92 points, it does kind of get to a point where the players who can improve you, in a numerical perspective at least, the pool is a lot smaller compared to a few years back when Liverpool did sign second choice targets, because Liverpool then, with a 60-point team, plenty of scope for improvement. Whereas now, there's only a select few really in a way that can actually improve Liverpool. But I think maybe have we been a little bit too rigid with that?
It could well be, but yeah, it was so hard to interpret what Jurgen means sometimes when he says these things, and a bit more risk, because everybody just instantly thought he meant, oh, I need more money, budget.
Yeah. Well, that's not right, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, where do the targets come from? They will come. Klopp will say what he needs, the roles he needs in the team, and then the committee should scout and provide the short list of targets, which then decide on. Were the committee not forthcoming with the relevant targets from the recruitment process side? Possibly, maybe there needed to be more names on those lists. It's difficult to speculate in that respect, Josh. You'd like to think that the fellas involved, just because Edwards is changed with Ward, you'd like to think that the stuff coming out of the recruitment boys was fairly consistent, wouldn't you? Me.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at what Graham said, that the vibe that I got was kind of, he can basically assess across Europe the impact of every single individual player and that individual player's impact on their team's goal difference and points tally, essentially.
Yeah.
So Liverpool basically go and signed best player of each team across the board. They went and looked at Monaco's best player in Tchouaméni, Porto's best player in Diaz, Benfica's best player in Nunez, and it's been Thiago when he was at Bayern, I suppose, in a way. So it's kind of a recurring theme across the board, and Bellingham probably fits that bill as well. Maybe Matthias Nunez fitted it at Sporting. But it just seems to be a case of, like, rather than picking a player who is a bit less likely to deliver the points that Liverpool need to keep improving, Liverpool instead decided to, I suppose you could say, stand still before eventually loaning a player who's always going to get injured. So it's just it looks like less future plan, less. I mean, did you think they knew about Mane leaving, for example?
Yeah, I mean, when I said when I did my season preview, I thought, we're going to have a big enough job as a team, just changing Sadio Mane for Darwin Nunez, or just playing without Sadio Mane. Maybe Jota was going to be in the front three with Diaz, for example, and Salah. That would have been a big enough job on its own, just to keep things going over. You had the change of Mane leaving. That's a big deal because he's been such a mainstay for 5 years. But then, not only did we want to do that piece of change, we then decided to change Trent's role. And then we decided to change Elliott role, and then we changed this, that, and the other. And there was too much change going on. And then you're trying to bring in a centre forward, as opposed to a wide forward. You play. There's no question that we have to change the way we play slightly for Nunez. So yeah, I think we bit off more than we could chew, Josh. I think in terms of what we were trying to change at the same time.
Yeah, out of interest, what are your thoughts on Nunez?
I think he's the tools. I can see why we paid the money, because you cannot buy those raw attributes are very, very valuable. I mean, I don't know what you think about his pace is just unreal. His movement behind defenders in the channels is very, very good already, and that's with him not being particularly coached so far. But his aerial ability, Josh. I mean, the header of last night, everybody thought it was Van Dijk, didn't they?
I did, yeah, I did.
Yeah, but you watch it and the one he did against Leeds. No, not Leeds. He was the one he did against Ajax. The Ajax lad was holding him, like grappling around the waist, and he just shrugged. He said, "Get off!" Shrugged it, broke out of the bear hug, and just bulleted the head home. I mean, he is unbelievable of physical tools that you got there. He just needs to be. He's a very, very rough diamond, I think, Josh, is the way I would put it, and he needs a lot of polishing.
Yeah.
And the fact that he doesn't speak English very well yet isn't going to help. So that means he needs to get that sorted as well.
Yeah, well, I think it would have been. It would have kind of epitomised Klopp's level as a coach, really, if it was going to be another seamless transition and he was just going to hit the ground running, maybe like Jota did. You know, consider he was coming from abroad, doesn't speak the language, and as you say, he's a very, very rough diamond. But I think the crucial element there is he is a diamond, though. You know, there's a player there definitely, and I think he reminds me a little bit of Suarez in many ways. He's just utter chaos, and you cannot predict what he's going to do, and his numbers especially are very encouraging considering just how many chances he's getting, and he's already getting the label of being a player who needs lots of chances to score. But that really wasn't the case last season. Last season he was clinical. So
yeah, that's right. It's true. Yeah, he did. He vastly outperformed his XG last season. I mean, the only way we'll see is with Nunez is once he's by March or April time, he's got a big sample of minutes, and what kind of performance baseline is he putting up at that point? But you could easily see him ending the season with 20, 25 goals in all competitions, couldn't you? I don't think you could say that's a bad season by anybody standards.
No, neither would I. So if we move away from the transfers then and just kind of assess the picture using the numbers, just basics.
Just one thing on the transfers, though. I did think we dropped the ball, right? And one thing is that we talked about, say, Milner and Henderson, for example. I've been a big champion of, say, Konrad Laimer from Leipzig. You always talk brilliantly in here about the Leipzig system and how well suited those players are to Liverpool and with Red Bull. But Konrad Laimer would basically be Jordan Henderson 4 years ago and James Milner 8 years ago. He's a utility player. He was he was very, very fast, getting up and down the pitch, covers grounds, pressures, tackles. And I think that was a real gap. We don't have that really physical. Somebody's primary job is off ball, energy, off ball, running, tackling, and pressuring. And I think that was the number one gap that we missed in the midfield. And I think that doesn't have to have been because Matheus Nunes is not that player, for example.
Yeah, but the difficulty about that though is you can say we missed it. Tchouaméni was that. You know what I mean? Tchouaméni is 6'2". Yeah, he ranked, I think, something like he's second or third last season for tackles and interceptions total across Europe's top 5 leagues. Yeah. Really athletic, mobile. You know, he was that kind of player. Liverpool identified him, and it was exactly what Liverpool needed. Really, the issue is we didn't get an alternative. That's the big problem. Yeah. And however we came to that decision that we don't need to get an alternative, we can wait another 6 months or potentially 12 months, despite only signing a 29-year-old Thiago in central midfield since 2018. It was just a bad move. Part of me wonders if Edwards was still there, would Edwards have been the guy to say, Oh, listen to me. You need a midfielder, basically, because we know he's done that in the past with the likes of Salah and things, and being that guy to challenge. Klopp's voice.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, but if you look at, say, just a team who's doing annoyingly well this season, Josh, in Newcastle, most weeks they play Joe Willock and Sean Longstaff in midfield. I mean, Sean,
yeah.
You know, how many Liverpool fans would want Sean Longstaff in our team? Not many, but he does.
Yeah.
He does. Very, very wise man who used to manage Liverpool once said that you need 8 players to carry the piano and 3 players to play it. And Sean Longstaff was born to carry a piano. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, be careful because people are going to be thinking that you're suggesting Sean Longstaff should end up at Anfield. Yeah.
No, what I'm saying is that we need players like Sean Longstaff.
Yeah.
To carry that piano. I don't think we have enough piano carriers in the team anymore.
No, I agree. Yeah, it's a great point. I totally agree, and that's captured by the numbers that I was going to touch on before. Across the board so far this season in the Premier League, Liverpool rank 3rd at the moment for non-penalty expected goals per match, which is not bad. Yep. It's enough to be right up there, basically. But on the defensive side of the game, by the same numbers, Liverpool rank, I think that is about 11th.
Yeah.
Underneath Aston Villa.
And much like in the penalties, I think we're bottom 6.
Yeah, if we use pens, we are bottom 6. Yeah. So that in a nutshell is what Liverpool have to fix. But I've seen people suggest, for example, James Maddison, and I don't see the need for a player like that.
No.
I really don't.
No.
Completely useless in terms of what Liverpool's problem is and how Liverpool solved this problem. Liverpool solved this problem, in my opinion, by going and signing central midfielders who will specifically make an impact defensively. That's how Liverpool fixed this problem.
Yeah.
And I'm not exactly sure who that is. I'm not sure whether it can be done in January. But I think the fact that Klopp's used 3 different systems this season and it hasn't really had much of an impact suggests that it's not really a formational problem. It's just kind of like a balance, stability, security problem, maybe in the middle of the park.
So what you're saying, Sean? What you're saying is we need to go out and sign Sean Longstaff.
We're going to have to title this episode "There's something to do with Sean Longstaff."
The Sean Longstaff. I mean, and the Leeds lad,
the Sean Longstaff.
Tyler, is it Adams? Tyler Adams. He just runs 13. He runs 13 kilometers a game, makes 100 sprints a match. He just closes players down. He tackles and he runs. I honestly just think we need runners. We need Jordan Henderson 4 years ago. We need James Milner 8 years ago. You replace those players in there, and I think a lot gets fixed.
So, out of interest, then, what are your thoughts on Bellingham then?
On who?
Bellingham.
He's going to be very expensive. We can get him.
Well, I suppose you could put that as another reason why Liverpool have potentially drifted from their original plan to achieve success. Because he's going to cost a lot, as you say, and it's a deal that Liverpool a few years back wouldn't have done, or maybe they would suggest we couldn't have done because we didn't have the attraction maybe for him. But now we have that. I don't know.
Well, one attractive thing about Jude Bellingham is, you've heard he's quite an offensive player, but I don't know if you've ever been to the Bundesliga official website, Josh. Like their equivalent of PremierLeague.com.
Yeah.
But they give you the distance, the sprints, the high intensity of every player. And the top players. And Jude Bellingham is pretty much top 5 in the league for all the physical attributes, as well as all the quality he's got in the final third and the passing. So he would, in terms of a high octane, high energy player, he does fit the bill. But what is I don't know how big the budget is. I don't know even if the player does Klopp still have the same pull? If Klopp's, has he got, like he did with Van Dijk, has he still got that pull? I don't know. So what is the budget? How much do you spend on one player? These are big questions, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I am personally of the belief that we need at least 2 at least 2 centre mids for me.
Yeah.
And there would be a bit of a, I suppose, threat to that if we was to dedicate around 100 million or so on
Well,
one player.
you'd have to get Bosman's style signed in. But we've done some good Bosmans. Joel Matip was a Bosman.
Yeah,
Free transfer. Obviously James Milner.
Lima.
So
Lima could be.
Say again.
I think Lime's contract.
He is. Yeah, he's up. Yeah, he's a free contract. Yeah, there's quite a few actually. There's quite a lot of surprising. I thought when I saw a list the other day knocking around on Twitter, and there was quite a lot of players on there. I thought, bloody hell, there's some not bad free agents there.
Yeah, Yuri Tillemans is one of them as well. But
yeah,
again, although I like him as a midfielder, I think if you look at Liverpool's specific problem, I don't know how much he addresses that, because, as I said, it's a defensive issue for Liverpool. It's an issue without the ball. And
I think
some of these players Liverpool are getting linked with.
I think he covers the ground in terms of, but there's a question maybe the speed at which he covers the ground is with Tillemans. People will say is off the line, off the mark speed, for example, and his top speed aren't high enough. But I think his engine is very good. Yeah.
Yeah,
but maybe he's more of a Toyota Hilux style forward truck. Maybe we need something a bit more nippy to get around and cover stuff. I know.
Yeah, well, even if he has got the mobility, though, it's still a case of he's never really been a player to hoover up loose balls, has he, or regain the ball for you. He's kind of a player who will play once you have the ball, unless you think otherwise.
I don't know. I mean, it's hard. Evaluating midfielders who play for Brendan is hard. You can look at what you can. He likes technicians, doesn't he, Josh? So.
Just about.
But if you look at what he's done before, I think there's enough there to say that his off-ball work for other teams has been good in his career. And if Thiago credits Klopp with teaching him to run and stuff like that, I'm sure. Why couldn't Tillemans do? Because he's 5 years younger than. He'd be 5 years younger than when Thiago signed, or 4 years younger. But yeah. I mean, it's possible. But the good thing is he's got the experience. He knows the league, so and he's not old. So.
Yeah, so if we were to kind of round up, then if we was to look at the whole picture, obviously we've touched on the fact that Liverpool's attack is pretty fine. Liverpool's defence isn't, and I suppose the reason why Liverpool are no longer picking up consistent results, I think it's interesting actually that Liverpool have 4 wins, 4 draws, and 4 losses in the Premier League. That's pretty much sums it up for me. But the reason for that is because if you look at Liverpool's underlying numbers, the games are just coin flips. Liverpool are not the better team in the performance realms. They're not out shooting their opponents.
All very, very close. All the performance levels in all the games are very close. The expected goals for and against, the shots for and against, quite too close for our comfort. We're not being dominant in games. You love that word, dominant. We're not being dominant, and each match result is decided by, on the day, which team takes its chances.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that one of the dominant performances that we have delivered was last night against Napoli. I think we posted over 2 XG, and I think we faced about 0.8 maybe off the top of my head. Not sure what we faced, but overall, anyway, what I'm getting at is, I suppose, how do we fix this? And let's say you're in charge, but what are you doing to fix this?
You don't want to do that.
And B, is this a long road back, or is this a case of you're never as far as you think?
Yeah. I didn't think we'd see the 4-3-3 back. This side of the World Cup, I have to say. Right.
Yeah.
I thought there'd been a conscious decision to move away, but you could argue that the performance, the change to 4-4-2 and the diamond didn't solve the defensive side at all. We were continuing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but then we played the 4-3-3 against Napoli last night, but it was better. It was the tweaked 4-3-3. It was Trent was deeper consistently.
Yeah, back to basics.
And the right 8 was maybe less aggressive than it has been. And then you also had Jones playing his academy role basically in the front 3. And you could argue he's more of a midfielder than a forward. But maybe that was where he played for 3 years in the academy, wasn't it, Josh?
Yeah, at times. I mean, He played a little bit of a Coutinho kind of role for the academy, I think, where he was sometimes as part of midfield three on the left, or sometimes as part of a left-sided front three. But a lot of the time, just kind of in the zone in between, almost that kind of Coutinho kind of area.
Yeah, but so that helped as well because he's a slightly more defensive player. But like you said, there was a lot to like in the game. I mean, the XG is obviously inflated by the last 10 minutes and corners, but the encouraging thing before that was Napoli are a very good team, but they didn't create a string of chances like not like Notts Forest did. For example, we just played. It was just like going back to a normal 4-3-3 match for us, and not really giving it many chances. And maybe that is the best way forward. It's the players. I saw the interview with Salah after the game last night, and he said, "Well, this is the position I played for most of the last 5 years. So he, of course he's going to be happy with that role. He knows it like the back of his hand." But maybe we just need to get out of the funky variations and like back to basic 4-3-3.
I think if I'm Klopp, that's probably what I'm doing. I think I'm probably sticking with the 4-3-3 now, with the awareness that the change in formations that we kind of experimented with didn't really have much of an impact at all on Liverpool's performances.
No,
I think 4-4-2. No. 4-4-2. We delivered a few nice results, but performance-wise, it was just much of the same, really. So, in terms of a formation, I think 4-3-3 we can stick with for the rest of the season, really. But a basic version of Liverpool's 4-3-3 that we've come to know in the past year, rather than Trent doing all this Galaxy Brain stuff. And if
Trent being told to do Galaxy Brain stuff, I think by coaches,
yeah, should probably clarify that, and on top of that, away from Klopp, I think if I suppose Julian Ward, which I said I was at the start of the episode, again, I'm probably leaning towards, if we're looking at fixes in the transfer market, central midfielders who are going to have an impact on the defensive side of your game. So which players across Europe and beyond maybe are having an impact on their teams in terms of positive impact on goal difference defensively. And in the next couple of weeks, obviously the World Cup starts, so I'll probably have an episode where we look at potential options who fit that bill. But that's probably how I'll
be disappointed if you don't end up with Sean Longstaff on that.
This is the most I've heard Sean Longstaff's name ever, not just on this podcast.
Yeah. But you can't argue with their results, can you? On the performance on the defensive side. So, but the other thing that needs to continue, of course, is Alisson. Because let's be honest, if we play with a season poll, he'd be the only person on the ballot right now. Nobody else is merited being on the poll. But yeah, he's just all competitions. I didn't get the numbers before. All competitions he's faced 28.9 post shot XG. XG. Remember, there's two versions of XG. XG from the perspective of the shooter, which is what we traditionally use to evaluate the team's chances. But post-shot XG is from the perspective of the keeper. So it starts from the place the shot was done, the power of the shot, the location of the shot within the frame of the goal, any swerve and that kind of stuff as well, and velocity of the shot. So he's faced 28.9 post-shot XG, and he's only conceded 21 goals, which is astonishing. So he's saved almost 8 goals in all competitions. And what we've played 19 games. No, 17 games in all competitions, 18 games.
I think it might be 19 now,
Yeah. So he's saved 8 goals more than expected in 19 games. That's bonkers.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, as an individual, he is having a massive impact on Liverpool's ability to secure results and points, basically. And I suppose Liverpool need that player for me in the middle of the park who's going to kind of have that impact. And instead of that, we've kind of got a gang of just average, okay contributors almost. No real difference makers in there apart from a 31-year-old version of Thiago, maybe. Hopefully we can get Fabinho back to his usual levels, maybe. But it's it's an interesting one anyway. I mean, if I'd have had you on the podcast last year, Dan, it would have just been us waxing lyrical about how great Liverpool are.
Yeah.
But now it's kind of a problem-solving exercise, really.
Yeah, it's always more of a challenge, always more fun.
Yeah, well, I've had a few listeners actually say that. But anyway, mate, thanks for joining us. Thanks for appearing on. And it was a solid debut.
Thanks, mate.
And tell people where they can find you.
They can find me on Twitter at Dan Kennett, KENNETT, and also the podcast of reference, Freak Podcast, at AI Under Pressure, part of the Anfield Index stable, AnfieldIndex.com.
Yeah, do give it a listen. As I said, it's quite similar to Analysing Anfield. So if you like this, you probably like that. But yeah, thanks for being on, Dan, and we will see you next week.